Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country that you're in. Edward Siegel, thank you so much for joining me again. Edward's in the DC area, so is it wintry back there?
It's very nice. It's in the 50s or 60s, so it might get up to 70 in the next day or so. And then
Whoa.
of course it'll probably snow the next day. So
Well, we're only supposed to make it to 50 today here in Las Vegas, so that's pretty amazing. Edward, he just told me that he reached 1.2 million readers for his stories on Forbes.com. Congratulations. That is absolutely amazing news. And you have other exciting news about your book, Crisis Ahead. Why don't you share that with us?
yeah, the Crisis Ahead, which was published last year, will actually be coming out in a Chinese language edition in January. And the publisher in Taiwan gave me the opportunity to update the book so it is as current as possible. And I updated the introduction to address what we knew and what was happening in this past July. So the book is still relevant. It's still up to date. And for anyone who's a Chinese language reader, I'm not. And if you know people who would enjoy the book in the Chinese language edition, look for it when it comes out next month.
I have to say, I mean, if you have any kind of business, little or big, Crisis Ahead is a must read, and it should be on your library shelf because it gives you real hardcore, real examples of when businesses have done it right and when they have done it wrong, and what you can learn from that. I lived in Kansas for about 18 years, and I moved there when Bob Dole was still in the Senate. I really didn't follow politics back then, but I always admired him greatly. And after his passing, and after reading your article and a couple of others, I'm really impressed with his life. What would you say was the most important lesson that a business owner can learn from what he did?
Well, I think the E word, empathy, of all the things he did, of everything he's been through, all of his accomplishments and all of his leadership traits and characteristics, I really think his ability to empathize and sympathize with others was a really important part of his success in life and also in politics. He didn't have to imagine what it would be like to go to war. He went to war. He didn't have to imagine or speculate what it would be like to be injured. He lost the use of one of his arms. He didn't have to imagine what it was like to be in a hospital for months on end. He went through many operations, and then he built on his experience in wartime, kind of like trial by fire, if you will, that really tempered him on to be the leader he wound up being. So I think empathy was a key to his success as a leader. And you don't have to go through what he did to empathize. You just have to have an open mind, an open heart, open ears, and open eyes, and put yourself in the shoes of others. The more you're able to do that, the more I think you will empathize and then be able to be a better leader as well.
I talk in my training about empathy and the two different types of empathy: the feeling empathy, as well as the understanding and putting yourself in other people's shoes by being and doing. So I think he did them both. I mean, one of the things I love that you wrote about in your article, that you quoted Charles Thorpe, who said, he said that Dole's ability to be clear about his North Star of serving his fellow citizens and subordinating ego, political affiliation, and self-interest to achieving that purpose is an inspiring and sustaining approach to leadership. In the face of social and political divisiveness, as Dole faced during his many years of public service, having an unwavering commitment to serving a purpose higher than oneself is truly the measure of superior leadership. That, to me, kind of rings the tone that we need to be sending this article to a few of our political leaders right now. I don't think they understand the word empathy.
Well, the challenge in learning is that you have to be willing to learn. It takes two to tango, two to dance, and two to learn. It takes a teacher and a willing and interested student. Some people, of course, would rather make their own mistakes than to learn from the successes or mistakes of others. And as I talk in my book, when it comes to crisis management, making your own mistakes is a great way to learn, but it's also one of the worst ways to learn. Why would you want to put yourself in harm's way, create a problem, create a crisis, make mistakes? You'll save so much time, energy, grief, and anguish if you pay attention to the successes, mistakes, and sometimes, yes, the failures of others. And what can you learn from all of them? And again, I keep coming back to the E word, empathy. If you want to be a better leader, you don't have to, stumble ahead and be accused of not being sympathetic or empathetic. Open your ears, open your heart, open your mind, and be empathetic today and see how that works for you. Chances are it'll work very well. You'll get good feedback. You'll get a better understanding of people. They'll have a better understanding of you. And that would be one of your first major steps for being a more effective, caring leader.
Sometimes, I talk quite a bit about the fact that I believe that God puts disasters in our path to bring us all together. And it's really interesting how all of a sudden you might not have talked to your neighbor. It might have been neighbors for 30 years and you didn't even know their name. And then after a disaster, empathy kind of kicks in and you start seeing and observing what you can do to help. And all of a sudden we sort of understand that E word, but then pretty soon we forget it. We don't continue on. And as business owners, I mean, I've been with all the hurricane, the tornadoes and everything that happened this last week is your heart goes out to all those people in the Midwest. And now today, it's a different part of the country, but it's the same scenario. So when it comes to disasters, it's important to be as empathetic as possible. So I think we could take some of what Bob Dole did by reaching across the aisle and listening. So that's another important word when it comes to what Bob Dole did, because everything I read is he was a really good listener and wanted to hear what other opinions were and what he could glean from those opinions that might fit within his own philosophy.
Someone once said that the reason God gave us two ears and one mouth is that we should be listening twice as much as we're talking.
Yep. and some of us are not very good at that.
We have it the other way around. Some of us.
Well, Dole, I was reading another article by what's this gentleman's name, Ronald Marks, and he says Bob Dole was the embodiment of the greatest generation, my parents' generation, from a small Kansas town. He was an athlete, farm boy who wanted to be a doctor. That dream was smashed when he was severely wounded in Italy during the last days of World War II. He went through a lot of anguish, a lot of pain throughout his life. And it appears that he took from that, he just walked through that fear, walked through getting past what he had to do to get to the other side. And I think that's another really important lesson that we all can take from that, whether we have a business or just life in general, that, we're going to have fear. We always are going to have fear. And he really showed us how to walk through that fear and what could happen. And the good news is once you walk through that fear, all of a sudden, then you're on the other side and you've learned, you've grown from that. And I think he was a really good example of that.
Another one of his great characteristics was humor. He was known for his sharp, almost pointed, acerbic wit, but he certainly made people laugh, and he certainly had the ability, another characteristic of a great leader, to make your point without offending people, but in such a way as they would remember it. And often he would be self-deprecating in his humor and make himself the butt of the jokes. He was asked after he lost the election when he ran for president in 1996 how he was sleeping at night. And he said he sleeps like a baby. He wakes up every 2 hours and cries.
I love it. I did have the opportunity one time to be able to hear him speak, and he did have a pretty wicked sense of humor, that's for sure. Well, don't you think when you create humor, and especially if you make yourself the butt of your jokes, you really disarm people that may otherwise put their their fear up and not want to hear what you have to say. And he was very good at being able to use humor to be able to disarm people and to help them to listen to what he had to say. I was reading one. I think it was in your article that you talked about Joe Biden. Said they oftentimes didn't agree, but they still were able to communicate with one another. When it comes to um, competition, obviously there's nothing more competitive than our Congress at the moment. Um, but taking that one step further and what we can learn as business owners, um, we all have competitors of one type or another, and what we can learn from that and how much emphasis we need to put on that is up for discussion. But the bottom line is we need to know who our competitors are. We need to know what they're about, and if we can do it in a way like he did of bringing humor into it, all of a sudden it's not competition anymore; it's collaboration. And if companies can learn how to collaborate with one another and not be competitors, I think that's a great gift that he showed us how to do.
I think that's a great point. And in the crises that we've been going through, COVID for the last couple of years, even the supply chain crisis that we're still trying to get through. Anytime you're dealing with a crisis, it's much better to partner with someone else, even if they're your competitors, to pool your resources, pool your knowledge, pool your expertise, and how you can get through it better, faster, and easier. They say misery loves company, and in a crisis, there can be a lot of misery, but there's also a lot of opportunities to work with the team. Take a look at how teams work in sports. We got a baseball team, football team, basketball team. Sure, there are some standouts and leaders, but if it wasn't for a team effort, then these teams wouldn't win. Everybody has a role. Everybody has a part to play. And I think sports can be another good source of inspiration for others on how to not just survive, but also to thrive in a crisis and deal with the situation and put it behind you as soon as possible.
I went through a mastermind group. It was all about collaboration, and I learned so much about how to collaborate and what real collaboration truly is. If somebody says to you, I want to collaborate with you, but please buy my product for $1,000, that's not collaboration. Collaboration is actually working together with one another to boost each other. So I interviewed a woman. I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she was the director of the Institute for Women in Leadership at Pepperdine University. And she brought up a really, really good point. She said that if there was anything that baby boomers could learn from millennials, it is that millennials believe that when the water rises, the boats rise, right? And as baby boomers, we were taught to be number one and to climb that competitive ladder and get there at sometimes the expense of whoever we stepped on. And she said if baby boomers could have learned that lesson of working and collaborating together, that our generation would have been even more powerful than it is right now. And I think so many people look at millennials as they're not knowing their kids, they're not knowing what they're doing. They've got their fingers on their phone and they're not paying attention. But in reality, what she told me is when you see them in school together, that they don't leave anybody behind. They don't. It's truly. So I think for business in the future, if we can all of us embrace that collaborative side in a true collaborative way, like Bob Dole did, I think our businesses will all be better off.
Well, collaboration is really important, and especially with global warming and climate change, it's great that the generations that are coming up, will be their world. This will be their problem, and rather than having a silo approach, a collaborative approach may be exactly what's needed to help continue the fight against global warming and other very large pressing problems, some of which we don't even know about yet. So with that kind of attitude, our chances of success could be much better than if just people decided to be on their own and not work with anybody else.
So if you're building a relationship with someone that you do want to collaborate with, In your opinion, what are the best tools you can use to make sure that it happens properly? Any idea?
Find out what's the most important to them and how you can get there. If you don't know what the goals are, what's driving the other person or the other company or organization, then you are really flying blind to see what are the areas in terms of commonality and where you can meet to work in collaboration. And that's really a good lesson that politicians, successful politicians like Bob Dole, he would go out of his way to find out what was important to the other side. How can he work with them to help achieve their goals while helping to achieve his own goals? A lot of legislation that was passed, thanks to his leadership, was done in concert with the other party, with the Democrats, Democratic leaders. It didn't happen by mistake or by chance uh, or accident. They worked together. They found out what was important to them, and they sought the middle ground. They thought the word compromise. Compromise is an important part of politics. And politics is really, I define it, and others have defined it, as the art of the possible. What can be done? How do we work together to achieve goals that are important to both of us and the people and the organizations that we represent? But if leaders have that same approach in the corporate and business world, they might find that their road to success will be a lot easier if they're willing to compromise, if they're willing to work with the competition on things that are really important to both of them. And when becomes necessary, what do they have to do to compromise? The other so old saying is true as well. A half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. It's better to get something out of a situation than get nothing at all. And that was another great lesson that from Bob Dole's legacy.
One of the articles I was reading is he would go into where the staff is, and he would sit down at one of the empty desks, and he would just chat with the staff, whether it might be sports or it might be some kind of legislation or whatever was going on. But it seems to me that he was very, very good at reaching out to other people to get their ideas. And you're right. I mean, he worked with Ted Kennedy, he worked with Joe Biden, he worked with a lot of the Democratic leaders in passing legislation that today may not be able to get passed anymore. Things like the Disability Act. So, well, I didn't really know that much about Bob Dole because back then I really wasn't paying attention to politics. But the things that I always admired about him and his wife um, were the fact that they were really servants. They were servants of public service. And if we can all just take a little bit of that, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's political, whatever it is, and find that piece of us that we are able to give back to something, I think that helps us to understand what collaboration is about, business wise as well as in our personal lives. So I just received my approval for my 501(c). So I am learning all about nonprofits now.
What is
So
your nonprofit going to be doing?
our first initiative is going to be, it's called Kits for Kids. And the idea is to put kits in the hands of every child. We're talking to the Rotary right now about helping us do that. And the nonprofit is called Crisis Knowledge Management and Preparedness Foundation. We're going to be providing education. We want to provide the kits for kids because a lot of times families don't have resources to do that, but also with the hopes that the parents then will decide maybe they need to have a kit. If the kids got one, maybe they should think about doing it as well. And we'll be providing some education things for people to know what they need to do. And my book is going to be a big major part of that. It's coming out next month. So I'm super excited about that. It's called When the Unthinkable Happens, Be Prepared, Be Ready. And I have to thank Edward Siegel for helping me come up with that title. I appreciate it. But yeah, I think so. What are your plans? What's your plans for 2022?
More of the same, more writing with Forbes.com. I'm hopeful of an opportunity to reach a larger audience. I'm really thrilled with In fact, I have a literally an international platform on Forbes.com. I'm writing almost every day, sometimes several times a day, on the good, bad, and sometimes the incredibly ugly ways companies and organizations and high profile individuals are dealing with a crisis. So I want to continue on that road. I'm looking for other opportunities with my books to see how I can provide even more examples and more advice to a larger audience. So if people haven't had a chance to read any of my columns yet, I encourage them to do so. They can read at least 5 articles for free on Forbes.com before the payroll kicks in. Just go to Forbes.com and type in my name and my columns. I've written more than 300 columns in the last 14 months or so. And then for those who are interested in taking a deeper dive into crisis management for companies and organizations, I encourage them to read my book, Crisis Ahead, which is available wherever books are sold. And for more information about my book, you can go to my website, which is publicrelations.com. That's publicrelations.com.
Wow. And if you want to know more about a crisis knowledge management and preparedness foundation or my certification called Crisis Knowledge Management, you can become a CKIM advisor and you can go out into your community and give back and become the superhero in your community all at the same time. So look forward to having you reach out to us. I have to tell you, we do not decide what we're going to be talking about, Edward and I, until right before we go live, because whatever the latest crisis is what we're talking about. So what are you writing about today, Edward?
Well, today I wrote about a new study that came out about the financial impact of misconduct in the workplace. Misconduct being sexual abuse or harassment, bullying, discrimination, anything like that. And a new study just came out today that shows the financial impact of misconduct in the workplace is more than $20 billion just last year alone. That's B as in billion, $20 billion. And I include in the story today information and advice from experts on the steps companies and organizations and business leaders can take right now to help prevent such conduct in their workplace. And importantly, when there is misconduct, the steps that they should take to deal with it immediately. Because if companies and organizations don't deal with a crisis like this, or if they choose to ignore it, or if they handle it the wrong way, it can turn into a even larger problem for their company and lead to other crisis situations. So that story on Forbes.com today, and I hope people will have a chance to read it and learn from it and apply to the lessons that we cover in that story.
$20 billion a year.
That covers that's based on the fact that several years ago, the Society for uh, Human Relations Management came up with a figure of about $4,100 it costs a company to replace an employee who leaves. And so this company I'm writing about today that came out with this study, they calculated the number of people who leave their jobs every year because they experienced misconduct at the workplace, and the cost to the company to find and replace a worker who left. So if companies are proactive and help prevent or discourage misconduct in the workplace, not only will they have a better workplace, people are more likely to stay around. And since this is literally a bottom line issue, companies can save a lot of money if they do the right things right now.
I need to include that into my class and talk about that. I had no idea the number was that big. I mean, we've got other man-made types of disasters and crises that don't come anywhere near that kind of money. So, yeah, that's a very important issue, and you hear about it all the time. You know,
Actually, that number might be conservative because it does not even take into account if there was any legal cost or extra compensation to an employee who left because of misconduct in the workplace. and the figure from the Society of Human Resource Management, that's based on their estimate of 5 years ago. So, if anything, that could be a conservative low number. Everything
Very.
goes up, nothing goes down, and that number is probably a lot higher than people imagine even today.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward. I'm going to jump on after we get done here and check out that article because I think I need to be talking about this as well. So, well, Edward, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back again in, well, we'll have to look at the date in about a month, we'll say.
We'll talk
But
next year.
yeah, we'll talk next year. Exactly. Exactly. Edward, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure. And truly, if you have not checked out his articles, they are phenomenal. If you get past the 5 that are free, then it's not expensive to extend it so you can subscribe to him. And I really appreciate you coming on with me. I really love doing this with you, Edward.
I do, and I urge people to buy both of our books. It's not either or. Consider bookends. You can have
Yeah,
a book on one end and my book on the other. We make great
there you
bookends.
go. All right. Well, listen, everybody have a wonderful holiday season. And Edward, we'll talk next week or next year.
Take care, everybody. Happy New Year.
All right. Bye-bye.